Hello, everybody. Welcome to Radio Dead Air Tech Q&A. You've got questions. We've got guesses. I'm Nash, been doing Radio Dead Air for ages and ages. In addition to that, I'm also an IT professional. With me, as always, my producer, Mike Gearman, who also works in IT. If you've got questions for us, please, by all means, fire those off. Send those to requests@radiodeadair.com, just like it says on the screen, or you put those in the comments of the YouTube video. You'll forgive me, I was running a little bit behind tonight because during the break there, I was trying to get a snack in, and one of the cats stole, I've got dinner rolls. One of the cats stole dinner roll off the desk and ran the fuck away with it.
So you got a different dinner roll, right?
Yes.
Just making sure.
Why the fuck? It's bread. Why the fuck does a cat want bread? Which one? Hamlet Rare, the one who acts like he's starving, even though he's being he's so chonky now.
I had a friend at university. Their cat would steal vegetables. Loved nothing more than a piece of lettuce.
Fucking weird little creatures. All right. Well, we've got a couple questions this week, but in addition to that, we've also CES has come and gone, and we got some confirmation on some stuff, some information and some others. Kind of the shape to come of video cards for the year, and well, let's just say we should still be putting our money on the Intel Arc series from the look of things. First of all, let's look at the announcements for the RTX series and some of the things they said and some of the things they didn't, but they did. The RTX 50 series has been announced.
And it's stupid expensive.
Yeah. Well, it actually isn't. It is and it isn't. We'll talk about that. First of all, yes, the RTX 5090 is more expensive than any 5090 series or 90 series cards been before. But if you take into account that it's actually a Titan series, they just tried to make it seem like it belongs in the gaming stack, even though it doesn't. Then, well, it's still stupid expensive. $2,000 for an RTX 5090.
And they've added a new spec line, not a new card line, but a new spec that they list for this series called AI Tops.
No one has any idea what the fuck that is.
No.
They invented a metric instead of gigaflops, which is an established metric across the industry of work, that if a card does that, we know how much per second, AI Tops. Nobody knows what the fuck that is. It's nothing. It's meaningless. So that's to start with. Now, while the 5090 is $2,000, everything else down the stack hasn't changed price much compared to the previous generation. The 5080 is now the price of the 4080 Super, which is the same, $1,000. 5070 Ti is actually cheaper than the 4070 Ti at $750 as opposed to $800. And the 5070 is now down to from $600 down to $550, which is well, those sound like great deals. There's always
until you
the
look
fine
at the specs.
print. Yeah, hold on, I forgot to change the stream info over here. Got to put that to talk show.
I always mean to have a little pop that says, remind Nash to change stream info in the 2 minutes before the show, and I never remember.
All right, let's get that there. So the tricky bit here is if you look at these charts and all of these charts, I don't have the charts up on screen, but some of them, some of the charts. If you look at these charts NVIDIA produced, they're saying, oh, the 5090 is super much faster, except they are not comparing apples to apples. And they've done this repeatedly for several generations now. What they're comparing is apples and oranges. because the 5090, as they keep doing with each generation of new card, is they restricted the DLSS, the brand new DLSS feature, to the newest card. In this case, it's a multi-frame gen. This one can now generate 3 AI frames, which are generated to in between frames. And the previous generation, DLSS 3, could only generate 1. Their DLSS 4 is not exclusive to the 50 series because, yeah, they are improving DLSS across the board. Frame gen is getting improved at the 40 series. Ray reconstruction, super resolution, deep learning, anti-aliasing, those all work on everything going back to the 20 series. So DLSS 4 is not one series exclusive, but some features are. Now, by using that multi-frame gen, they're lying and saying, oh, these cards are so much faster. Except not every game is going to support that multi-frame gen feature.
In fact, most games won't support that multi-frame. There's probably not a game right now that supports it.
Yeah.
And in a year from now, we might see some games support it, but there's going to be plenty of games that are going like, we don't really need this. Why would we spend all the time and effort to implement this feature, pushing back the release of our game and money coming in, that we don't need?
Now, if you look at again in the fine print here, there were 2 games that do not support this new feature, and that was the ones they tested: Far Cry 6 and A Plague Tale Requiem. Those aren't going to support multi-frame gen, or at least not right now. And when they compared those, and the charts aren't here, they have to find it on another website. They put
Gotcha.
Ours is kind of not doing great these days. If you compare those, in fact, let me see if I can see NVIDIA.
I'm going to guess that it was a minor improvement at best.
Let's see if I have the images here. Here's the one. And they did this with the RTX 5070 Ti. Here's the front. If you look at this, on the far left, you're going to see Far Cry 6 and A Plague Tale Requiem. Those are as close to apples comparison with the previous generation as they're going to get. 4070 Ti versus the 5070 Ti. These two, the very far left, and that is about maybe at best a 20% improvement.
Which, okay, for some games, 20% might be a lot, but
overall, if that is how...
It doesn't feel like $2,000 worth of expenditure.
Well, if that's how this scales, not just across the RTX line, but across Blackwell, this year is going to suck for a lot of people, and not just gamers. If we're only seeing, without, the tricks like DLSS, which AI generation and all that stuff, the AI chat GPT, large learning, they don't use DLSS. No. They just use the raw power. And if
it's only this kind of increase, they're not going to be happy.
No.
And that makes me happy.
Keep in mind, Blackwell was already delayed because they were having power issues and cooling issues. If this is the best...
I'm shocked that a card that they had to develop, card series that they had to develop specific new power connectors for is having power issues. Shocked.
The 5090 itself, the Founders Edition 5090, has to use liquid metal. And as we've talked about in previous, when consoles, you've had the PS5 used liquid metal for cooling. And the reason it did was it was so compact. It needed every extra ounce of cooling power it could possibly get. If the 5090 and the 5090 is using liquid metal for thermal material, it must be running hot as shit. Even with the time they delayed to get it to work. That's not good either, because if that's how Blackwell is scaling power-wise, that's going to suck for the server environment.
Yep.
That means if they swap these in place of current Lovelace GPUs, then their temperatures across the data centers are going to increase. This is not what OpenAI was. Yeah, this is not what OpenAI was looking for. This is not what all these large learning machine generation companies were looking for. They weren't looking for a little bit of a boost with a lot more thermal problems and a lot more power requirement. That's not what they were looking for. They needed the power. They a little bit of a boost.
They needed either a huge boost with not significantly much more power, which would require NVIDIA to refactor the whole thing from scratch, probably. And even then, maybe not. Or a little bit of a boost, but significantly less power so that you could roll a bunch more of them in and just solve the problem by throwing more cards at it.
This appears to be a little bit of a boost with a lot more power requirement. So that's why you're getting a discount on the new cards next year compared to the prices of the 40 series. That's why they're willing to knock $50 off the price, because compared to the 40 series, they're not that good. They're not that big of an improvement. No. Compared to the 30 series, they're probably a pretty decent improvement. Compared to the 20 series, definitely. But if you're currently an owner of a Lovelace GPU, there's not a lot of incentive here to upgrade.
Yeah, keep it. Run it as long as you can.
So, yeah, this is the between the lines for the 50 series. We're going to obviously get benchmarks fairly soon, but they're leaning very heavily on the DLSS stuff, which is not going to be a big, I would say that for $550, the 5070 doesn't look too bad. If it's a 20% boost over the 4070, that's not the worst thing in the world. But it's not fantastic either. Let me see how much RAM does the 5070 have? That's going to be the deciding factor here. Okay. I just need to double check the numbers on that. RTX 5070. How much RAM is that going to have? Let's see.
It should be 16.
It's not. It's 12.
Bad call.
For $550, the RTX 5070 is going to have 12 gigs of RAM. I want to point out you can get a card with 12 gigs of RAM for $250. And that's the Intel Arc B580, which is looking better and better by the day.
Yep.
To be at the $550 price point and be offering 12 gigs of RAM in 2025 that's not even a deal, honestly, for the 5070. It's not a big improvement over the in fact, the RT cores it's gone from 46 RT cores to 48, 192 tensor cores from 184. Shaders have only increased by about 300 or 400. I mean, honestly, it's a new process. It's still the same process node. It's still 4 nanometer. Obviously, they have a new architecture, but I'm not seeing the value here or the big performance case. I think this may be NVIDIA's generation to stumble, because right now, even without AMD and without Intel, their biggest competitors are themselves.
In the used card market.
Or even currently, even NVIDIA's biggest competitor is the 40 series, which there are still plenty of on shelves. And those are going to get some nice discounts. Maybe not like huge, but probably $50 to $100 off. Like, I can't see them selling a 4070 anymore for $600. Or that's gonna have to come down a bit. or or I think that's down to 500 now or 550. Those prices are going to have to come down a bit compared to the 50 series, and those are going to look far more attractive than the RTX 50 cards, because if 12 gigs on a $500 card, $550 card in 2025. So this is not good. This is not what people were looking for. And while even the 5090, if the 5090 scales the same way, the power increase on the 5090, let me say 5090 versus 4090. Let's see.
5090 versus 4090 is 575 watts versus 450.
Versus 450. So the wattage has increased a ton. Oh yeah, it is 20%. Teraflops boost went from 82.6 to 104.8. That's only about 20%. That's not a huge. Ooh. All right. It does have higher memory bandwidth because they are moving to GDDR7, which will make a difference. But I'm not seeing like, and for the power requirement on the 5090 for all of the this is not
25% additional power. That's a hard sell for a lot of people.
$575 just for, not dollars, 575 watts just for the video card means that all the rest of the system, we did some math on the Blue Skies. We figured this thing will at minimum require a 1,000 watt power supply. Could potentially, if you have sufficient cooling in the system and the boost clocks go high enough, could potentially get the system to 1,100, 1,200 watts at high power, at high usage. I wouldn't feel comfortable running this in a high-end system without a 1,600 watt power supply. And
Which is pushing your level of home wiring to the limit.
Well, a 1,600 watt power supply, that's just for overhead, because it's not actually going to reach 1,600 watts, but that's the amount of safe overhead wattage the power supply be capable of to make me feel safe running those components. Because right now I have a 1,200 watt power supply. My system doesn't get anywhere near that. My system gets to about 800 watts when I push it really hard. I've got the extra 400 watt on the power supply for overhead, so it's safe. But yeah, even a system pulling 1,200 watts, a home system, not a workstation, a high-end home user system pulling 1,200 watts is ridiculous.
Yep.
And if they put these, well, we'll talk about this in a second, because there's another product we have to talk about. If they put these multiples of these in AI workstations and such, we'll talk more about the home breaker stuff in a minute. Let's move over to AMD, what they have on offer with their RX 9070 XT. They're bringing that in at also to compete with the 5070. They're calling that at $530, $20 less. And
I will say the specs on it are in certain places well better than the 5070.
Yeah, it's got 16 gigs of RAM. So,
yeah. It's got a 256 bit memory bus. Mm-hmm. It uses 10 watts more power, but that's okay.
Yeah, just 10 watts more than the 4070. And it's also putting itself, they're slotting it in there to compete pretty close to the 7900X or the 700 XT, not the XTX, but the XT. It might be able to do that. From the look of it, yeah, it clocks almost to 3 gigahertz. There's probably going to be a little overclocking fun people can have there.
Yeah.
Rumors are suggesting up to a 3.1 gigahertz boost for the premium versions. That's interesting. This might be, considering the idea that AMD is abandoning the high end, but are competing more seriously at the mid-range and lower, might work out fairly well considering what NVIDIA is bringing to the party. Because the 5080 doesn't, I've got a 4080. I don't have a 4080 Super. I've got a 4080. And I'm telling you, the 5080 doesn't look like something I would be willing to swap for.
If one fell off the back of a truck in front of you, you wouldn't say no, but you're not going to pay money for it.
No, I'm not going to. I mean, I could, in theory, I could yank this one out, clean it up, sell it used, maybe $500-$600 with all the stuff. Then like extra 400 combined, I'd get a 5080. I'm not going to bother doing that because the performance gain doesn't look like a great. Maybe if some get used later on down the line, but even then, I'm not sure it's even worth it, especially with the power wattage requirement going up.
Yeah. The big thing NVIDIA needs to look at, and I've been saying this since about the 3000 series, is power consumption. They need to, even if it means they have a generation of no significant performance increases, if they can drop the wattage and keep the power and keep the performance the same, they'll pick up some friends from that.
Yeah. It's not. I like the competition. I'd be more interested to see what the 9600 looks like, to be perfectly honest, or the 9060, I guess they're going to call it, because that's going to be probably 400 and under. There's probably going to be a 9060, a 9060 XT, a 9070, a 9070 XT. The 9060 is probably going to be around the $300, $350 mark. That's the one I'm really curious about, because the entry level now is going to be Intel in the B580 for 250, 200 to 250. Intel's got it locked up. The 9060 at 350, if it can run rings around Intel stuff and be an appreciable bit better than NVIDIA's, this could be AMD's generation to shine. This could be their chance. They've got to watch their pricing. They've got to be realistic with their goals. Other things they announced for the new 9070 series is FSR4. And for the first time, even though they've been kind of wishy-washy about this, it seems that FSR4 is not going to be backwards compatible. FSR4 will require the 9070 series, the 9000 series, or better. Probably because they are this. We don't know specifically. We'll get more information once these are released. But probably the 9070 and the 9000 series is going to have more specialized components in it than the earlier versions. The earlier RX, the 5000, 6000, 7000, the way they did their ray tracing stuff and their FSR, which is their version of DLSS, the way they did that was they didn't have specialized components like NVIDIA did. NVIDIA has their RT and Tensor cores. Those are cores specifically to do those jobs. They're separate from the regular graphics generation. The rate, they're separate than just the drawing purpose. They are specialized for those extra functions. AMD tried to do it with all generalized cores. They didn't have specialized cores in there. There may have changed that approach. There may be specialized cores for the ray tracing, for the...
I will say the one thing I'm not liking about the 9060 specs that I'm seeing leaked and whatever is that the 9060s are only going to have 8 gigabytes of RAM.
That's true, and that is a place for Intel to make up ground, because if we see the B770 and the B760, the higher end, that's going to be their $300, $350 cards. Intel, and if Intel goes, no, we'll give you 12 gigs at that. If that's what it goes, we'll see what happens. Pricing, we don't know yet. If the 9060 XT, let's say, comes with 12 gigs and is $350, That's going to be pretty good. If the 9060 is the $350 card with only 8 gigs of RAM, that's not going to come out as good. That's not going to come out as good at all. However, from the good news is, from what people have said, looking visually at the comparisons at CES, FSR4 looks like they've caught up to NVIDIA. It finally looks like it is an acceptable side by side with DLSS, which is good news. That means that, apparently FSR4 is going to be weird because it's still going to be open to all video cards, but they're going to have specialized stuff for the AMD. At least they haven't been super clear about it. But we'll see if that pans out as well. That's nice. We'll see how that goes. Final thing I want to talk about this week, we were talking about the power supply stuff.
This is just ridiculous.
It's a dawn of a new age. Thermaltake, well, Sonic already has one of these. Now it's Thermaltake's turn. Thermaltake showed off a 2,000 watt power supply that will not function with a default US home breaker.
Nope.
Maybe
you could maybe use your stove breaker.
Well, yeah. All right. In the United States, the standard home breaker is 15 amps with a maximum of 1,800 watts pulled across it. If you pull more amperage, if you go to like 1,900 watts, if you pull more amperage than that, the breaker trips and shuts your power off.
And you can do stupid things like tape your breaker down. I don't recommend it. It's a great way to start a fire. There's
also some outlets in the house are wired to 220 volts. Your stove is wired to 220 volts. Your clothes dryer is wired to 220 volts. Now, the reason why is, and you can correct me on this, I think it's been so long since my classes on this.
Circuits was a long time ago for me too.
When voltage increases, amperage decreases.
If we're talking about the same watts, yes.
Right,
if
same
the wattage
wattage
is staying the same.
The wattage is the same. You can pull more wattage at lower amperage if you increase the voltage. So that means you can have a lower amperage breaker, but if you increase the voltage, you can pull higher wattage across it and it'll be fine. That's why in Europe and most other places, I think Australia's 240, Europe's 220. Most other places run at 220 volts. Is their default for their outlets. This will plug in just fine into most other outlets, and you could pull that 2,000 watts. You shouldn't really pull to. Wattage is a rating. When it says it's rated for 2,000 watts, you should never push a power supply to its utmost rated wattage. You should always leave. That's why I left a little headroom in mind. You should always have some headroom. The max wattage you should ever pull through this thing, I would say, is 1,800 safely. If you pull higher, you run the risk of damaging, because these are not meant to run flat out full all the time. In any event, you're sitting there going, why in God's name would you want a 2,000 watt power supply? Well, there are going to be people with home workstations or office workstations that are going to be running multiple 5090s. Or right now, they might be running multiple 4090s or multiple 4080s. It's not viable for gaming anymore, but it is viable. There are programs like Blender, there are compilation programs. Yes, there's ChatGPT and that horse shit that can make use of multiple graphics cards in one system. So that's what this is. Stupid. This is like these already kind of exist.
So unless you're building a new house in the US
Yeah.
and are wiring it to a higher standard than is standard,
Yeah.
this is not for you.
Yeah. I mean, you could just not have a dryer in your house or a stove in your house. Put the computer in, yank out the stove and put the computer in the kitchen. There you go. That'll be just fine. That's reasonable. Before now, they were 2,000 watt power. I looked these up and they were scary because they were made for crypto mining. They were made for putting bunch of video cards in one system for crypto mining. And they looked like they were made for crypto. They were just like the rickiest, shoddiest shit. Just sort of strapped together and you pray. I wouldn't trust one of those things as far as I could fucking throw it. But yeah, that's the that's what
I should note this power supply has 4 of those NVIDIA power plug.
Yeah, the 12X, the 12
volt,
whatever,
2x6.
Yeah, 12 volt 2x6, whatever they're calling it now, because the original version was they had to revise it because it was catching fire, and the new version still catches fire. Yeah, it can handle 4 of those, four of those, and if you understand what that means, the upper limit of one of those, supposedly, allegedly by the spec, the upper limit of those are 600 watts. So, yeah. So this thing, this is the shape of things to come, we should say, because it doesn't look like efficiency is big on the menu anymore. Not when you have an industry clamoring for raw power, and that industry isn't the gaming industry. Though even still clamoring for raw power, I feel like Blackwell is going to disappoint a lot of people. I think Blackwell sales are...
I'm going to be honest with you, Nash. As long as one of those people is Sam Altman, I'm okay with this.
Yeah. So yeah, it's this is in addition to them saying we need more funding than that has ever been pulled for a venture capital endeavor ever. Now they're also going to have they needed a major, massive technological leap, and Blackwell is not it. Blackwell is not.
I'm almost certain I mentioned this before. I love that he redefined AGI, artificial general intelligence, as when we have a model that has 100 billion in profit. No, that's not what.
Yeah,
that's not what that is. That's you going, this is when I'm cashing out of the scam. That's what you said. That's what you just said.
They literally just said, fucking idiots.
If he falls in a ditch and gets eaten by shrews, I will laugh.
Neat. All right. Now it's time for your questions.
I don't know why a ditch and shrews. It just occurred to me.
Just came to mind. If you got tech questions, you can send those to request@radio.air.com. We got a few of them this week. Okay, this one's for Marcy, and I potentially have bad news for you, Marcy. Hello, Nash and Mike and Cats. I just noticed something, and now that I can't stop, and it's driving me crazy. I got a new monitor back in November during Black Friday, and I love it in every other regard, but now that my AC hasn't been running as much, and I guess you must be in like Australia or something, is the best I can figure, because if it's November, your AC was... Anyway, now that my AC has been running as much, I realized it's making a noise. I didn't think monitors did this, and I made sure to mute the speakers so I could rule out the HDMI audio, so that's not it. It's a very quiet but persistent high-pitched squealing, and the brighter my screen is, like when it's white or blank space, the more intense it gets. What's going on? Thank you, Marcy R. Welcome to Coil Wine. All right, so electronic components can vibrate. Not often. It's more likely the more electricity is going through, which is probably related to why it gets worse when the screen gets brighter. Coil Wine is a vibration. There are components on a board that when a lot of electricity is going through them, they start vibrating, and that creates a very high-pitched whining noise. The frustrating thing here is that is considered within tolerance because it does not affect the performance of the device otherwise. Video cards have been doing this for a long time, especially as they've been getting more and more power chucked through them.
Yeah. Now, it's a bit unusual for a monitor to be doing it, but it's not unknown. So there's a couple things you can try. See if there's a factory reset mode on the monitor. Sometimes it's just something you can do and it'll discharge something and suddenly go, no, that's gone. How'd that happen?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. Check options on the monitor. If there's a special backlight mode on the monitor, turn that off. See if the coil whine goes away. It could be associated with that.
Cause I've had my RTX 4080. When I start kicking it up hardcore and I'm playing games really hard, you can hear it. I'm not talking about the fans. I'm not talking about the pump. I'm talking about the card itself starts making a disconcerting noise. It's actually, if you didn't know better, it's scary because it sounds like a bomb is charging up. It's this, and it gets more intense the harder you game. And when you game less, it comes back down. That's because the more electricity goes through it, the more the parts vibrate. This is some manufacturers of devices will accept excessive coil whine as a reason for an RMA. Some, but not all. Because
you didn't give us a model number or a manufacturer. So I would check with your manufacturer. Now it may be because they say, oh, this was a Black Friday deal. It's as is and you're out of luck. But some of them will go, yeah, okay, no, we'll take it back. We'll give you a new one.
Yeah, there's no guarantee. Sometimes it's just a specific board with specific parts put together in a specific way that hits that resonance. But you could have the exact same model, exact same board, exact same components on a different unit, and it doesn't make a single bit of noise. It's resonance and vibration, and it's wild and it's weird. Some companies will consider excessive coil whine grounds for an RMA. Some will not. The reason they won't is because technically there's nothing wrong with your device. It works. It's not going to blow up. It's functioning just fine. It's just that's considered an acceptable side effect of the device. Your best just to check to see if they will accept it on RMA. Otherwise, maybe turn the brightness down. But you may have to.
We have a question in the channel of RMA.
Yeah, that's what Mr. Aridin said. He suggested an RMA. That's what he was.
Oh, I thought he was asking what RMA meant.
Yeah, no, he was suggesting.
Okay, sorry, my bad.
It's a matter of, technically your device is still working just fine. So they may or may not accept it back. It's hard to say, unfortunately.
I did see in researching this one, sometimes people have had, part of this part of the answer is going to depend on the model of the monitor. Most monitors have just a power cable and their power brick is effectively internal. Yeah. Some models of monitors have an external power brick.
That's true. Yes.
Some people have had luck with those external power brick models of replacing the power brick and the monitor noise goes away.
The power brick is where most of the electricity flows through. It's the big kahuna of the whole thing. I've had that with laptops before. I've had the power brick had a little bit of coil whine, but I get a new one, coil whine goes away. So if the monitor has an external power brick, mine actually have external power bricks. You can either, number one, try swapping it out if it's possible. See if your manufacturer has one, or if you could find a third party one. Or try maybe, and I don't put electrical components in smothering conditions where the heat will build up, but try blocking it off. Or here's something I've done with hard drives. I'm not sure if it would help with the power brick. I put them in a cardboard box with ventilation, but just closed in a box. And it made my hard drive noise. It was external hard drive. I put the external hard drive.
It made the noise tolerable.
Yeah, it dampened it down. I didn't even like stuff it with anything. I just put it in an open cardboard box, closed it up. It still had ventilation and everything, but the noise got a lot better. So,
yeah.
Minsby says is using.
Oh, go ahead.
Minsby says, is using distilled water and microfiber cloth the proper way to clean a monitor? No, it is not. There are specifically cleaners made for electronics. You should definitely get those. Glass, not standard glass cleaner. There are cleaners for screens. Get screen cleaner. Spray it onto the cloth, not on the screen. Turn off the screen, clean it, make sure it's dry, turn it back on. That's how the proper way to clean monitor.
I have a mildly amusing power brick story.
To
seg into the power brick. I had a user this last week return a power brick saying, "Can I get a replacement power brick?" And I'm like, "Why?" And he showed me the tip that plugs into the computer. And in the tip of the plug, a plastic bead had gotten wedged. We're not sure where the plastic bead came from. How it happened to magically get wedged in the tip, but it meant it wouldn't plug in anymore. And I didn't have any tools that could remove that. And yeah, just like, yeah, we'll
that's what she said. Anyway,
let's go to the next question.
Yeah. This is from Nathan. It's a fairly simple one. Hey, Nash, Mike, do you have any recommendation for pop filters? I'm using an Elgato Wave DX for things like podcast recording and chatting during games, but I also want something that's not really big so it won't get in the way of the screen. Hey, guess what? I don't know if you've noticed this on my screen right now. This is my pop filter. It probably looks like part of the microphone. It isn't. Put it on screen over here. Was not expensive for me to get, and is a pop filter. In case you're not aware what this is. There is a when you're close to a microphone, there are certain sounds you make with your mouth that are called plosives. That's the actual term for it. The P sound and the B sound and any sound that bursts of air come out of your lips. Those are called plosives, and they can be noticeable to the point where it's distracting. And if you're recording a podcast, those can be kind of irritating. I can speak from experience. When I got this,
so what happens is you get basically a piece of mesh between you and the microphone, and it catches those.
Yeah, it spreads it out.
It's a piece of audio magic that I probably could figure out the science on with a book. But
yeah, it's there are ones that are like big circular ones that fit, but they are large. There are smaller versions of those, but I've always found those have been unwieldy. So when I got this mic and I refurbished this microphone with a new circuit board that needed some modifications on it, I got this, which is the pop filter, and I think this is actually a cheaper version of the one I got, but this is the cheap version for like $8. It is a curved pop filter. I looked at the Wave DX. The Wave DX is square, but this should still fit on it because it holds itself on with elastic bands. There is I think there's a slightly better version of this. Curved.
See, I don't use a pop filter because that's because the microphone for me is all the way over here. Like literally, I'm pointing off the screen right now. I can't even touch my mic.
Here's a better version. This one actually has foam. Yeah, get this one, not the one I'm showing you. This is the one you want, because this one actually has a layer of foam in there too to help knock off the wind noise. It's got windscreen and plosive, and yes, this is a much better. It's only $9, $9.99, $10. It just clips on with some elastic bands and it holds in place, and it's very simple. Should do the job for you and be unobtrusive. I specifically got this one because it's unobtrusive, because it won't block me when I'm trying to look at the screen or block my face when I've got in front of the camera. This kind of handles all of it. So, yeah, fairly simple. Hopefully that answers that one for you. Last one. Let me double check. I think this is the last one we got tonight. Yes, this is going to be the last one. This is from not Grandpa Simpson.
Back in my day, we hung an onion on our belts.
Hi, guys. This is just a general opinion type question. How long should you keep using a computer power supply? I've been using the same 750 watt Corsair RM750 for about 10 years. It's never given me any trouble, and it doesn't seem to be noisy. I make sure it gets cleaned out every once in a while with the rest of the system, and the fan seems to be fine. It was just your talk about the electrolytic capacitors last week that got me to thinking, how long will this thing still be good?
I mean, a lot of that is going to depend on the make and model. Some manufacturers use really cheap components. And so, they may say, oh, yeah, it's got an average life of 5 years. And others will say, oh, we use much more durable components, and it's got a life of 10 years.
Well, let's back up a sec. What we were talking about last week, in case you missed it, electrolytic capacitors are a component that is very common in electronics. We don't have a really satisfactory, affordable replacement for them. They capacitors we need in certain applications. The trouble is they have a finite lifespan. If you use them for too long, or if they sit on a shelf for too long, they eventually can go bad because there's an electrolytic substance inside, a goo, that actually is used for conducting the electricity.
A great analogy is like your car battery, okay? So your car battery, you get a new car battery, it's good for anywhere from 4 to 6 years, usually. Higher quality ones may last longer, lower quality ones will not. And when it starts to go, suddenly stuff starts not working. And I use this analogy very specifically because I had to replace my car battery today.
Well, I mean, eventually those do wear out. It's now with electrolytic capacitors, you have two options. You can replace those depending on the device. If we're talking like vintage electronics, you really have no other option because you can't just replace a vintage electronic. I mean, you can, but that's stupid expensive. It's very cheap to replace capacitors in those. But some instances, in some
high
cases,
voltage things, you want a professional to do that, if at all.
Yeah. Computer power supplies have big old electrolytic, chunkus, D-cell battery-sized capacitors in them, and they can retain lethal voltage for a long period of time, even if they haven't been plugged in.
Even if they've gone partially bad, they can still retain lethal voltage.
Unless you are trained to handle electrical devices, unless you are skilled with this particular thing, never open a computer power supply. Never freaking ever. It's very dangerous in there. If you do know what you're doing, you can replace the capacitors in those. It's a little irritating, but it can be done. But it also depends on the power supply model. For example, with mine, when mine's out of warranty, mine's a 1200 watt, pretty nice. It's an HX 1200i from Corsair. It's a pretty nice one. If this one dies, I may be tempted to replace the capacitors in there just because it's a very expensive unit and it's out of warranty. It's still perfectly good, so I might be tempted to do that. But for an RM750, that's about what, 80? What's the current they've been making RM 750s for a long time. Let's see what that is.
Yeah, I don't even know.
That's RM 750X. Are you shitting me?
$100.
That's 100. Yeah. Unless that's like an older one. Yeah.
Now,
honestly, I think they probably have a better. Let's see, Corsair set.
At the same time, I'm going to say if you do decide to replace it, you'll need to replace the cabling as well. Even if it's modular, if your old one's modular, which you said 10 years, that might be pushing it on modular.
Yeah. Yeah, God damn, the prices have gone. Oh, okay. Well, no, there are some other options here. I guess you have the RM. Those are like slightly nicer. So you can get another RM 750X is the replacement, looks like, and that's about $120. A little bit further down the stack, there's the CX 750, which is also modular. They're just bronze instead of gold. And that's only about but anywhere between $70 to $90, which is a lot more palatable.
What's the warranty on those?
Oh, I think they got lifetime on Corsair power supplies, but I don't know how lifetime. Let me look that up. Corsair.
Remember, places will define lifetime on their own meter.
Yeah. Power supply warranty. 10-year warranty. Well, okay, all right, yeah. Platinum efficiency have a 10-year warranty. Let's see. So mine still has a pretty good warranty on it, actually, because mine's platinum efficiency. Power supply units, models with gold or platinum, RMX series. Models produced before 2019 have a 5-year warranty, so yours is way out of warranty now. In 2019 or newer, have a 10-year warranty. Yeah, Corsair's got a pretty good warranty on their power supplies.
Yeah,
that's nice.
No, I put a Be Quiet on mine, and their 750 also has a 10-year warranty. So just something to look at. But now where I was going is when you replace this, your previous one probably not modular. Even if it were, use the cables in the new one. It's a pain to pull all the cables and put in new cables. But the thing we say every time is, even when it's the same manufacturer, the same model line, the pinouts at the power supply end may not be the same, and you may end up zorching everything else.
Corsair does have a good matrix to show you what's compatible with what, but if you get new cables with the new power supply, it's kind of
there's no reason not to swap them out.
Yeah. I think after 10 years, you're probably still good. With computer power supplies, I would say once you hit 20 years is maybe, if it's still working, if it's still in good condition, if it's not having any problems, 20 years is probably the upper limit. And I know there's some that have been from back in like the 2000s. They still work. They're probably on their last legs, but they still work.
I've got power supplies at work that are 20 years or older. But again, those are sort of like mil spec, ruggedized deals, special made.
Oh, at 20 years, electrolytic capacitors are getting a bit sketchy, and that's about when you should replace them. Yours is probably still 100% fine. As long as it's working, it's in good condition, you're keeping it clean, it's not making any weird noises, and you're not having any reboots or strange behavior from your computer, your power supply is still probably absolutely fine. Those are, they're weird. Either they work fine or they don't. It's strange. There's not a lot of in between with those.
You can say the same thing about a lot of people.
Yeah, honestly. I think you're going to be okay for a few more years with that RM 750. If you do upgrade, if you do replace it, 750 is okay. It's still okay, power supply size. But you may want to start looking at something like an 850 or something. Get something a little bit nicer if you're looking to replace them. Raritor says, at work, I've had 10-year-old power supply units fail, but not all and not all at once. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It is a complete crapshoot as to which one's going to fail. So a group I used to work with had this thing where he said, we go in and we do maintenance on our equipment, but it's mostly for show because it never breaks. Like they'll go in, they'll check that the wiring has not degraded, but the units that the wiring goes to never break. Like in 30 years, they've had stuff catch voltage and burn out because someone else downstream connected something wrong. But the units themselves have only broken when someone pulled it out of the chassis and dropped it basically face first.
Is it broken?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say that those had no capacitors, but
yeah. Otherwise, does maintenance include blowing the dust out of the machine? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Because dust is one of the big couple of problems. Dust in a computer, in electronics, are a couple of issues. Number one, they impair cooling. Number two, they're a fire hazard. Dust is flammable as all shit.
Yeah. Well, depending on what it's comprised of, it's dirt, it's paint particles, it's pet hair, it's your
dust
hair.
Dust is mostly people. Dust is mostly people.
It's actually not. But smash badgers. If you get that reference, well good on you. All sorts of stuff. Lint, yeah.
Yeah, it's you don't want to let that build up inside your system for any reason. But no, just not Grandpa Simpson. To get back to your question, you're fine. That as long as it's in good shape, you probably still get another, I would say, a solid 5 years before I'd be concerned about it. If it's 10 years old, then 5 more, you should be fine.
Now that said, if you're going to be rebuilding a significant portion of your computer and you have the budget for it, I'd say maybe the time when you've taken everything else apart, maybe you swap it out then just to get everything done at once. But that's me.
Okay. Well, that is going to do it for us for this week. Thanks for your patience with all my nonsense. In case you weren't aware, yesterday I had some issues contacting my website. I thought my website had gone down, but it was only down for specific people. Turns out there is a data center just north of LA. And that was, if you've ever run a trace route, there are hops along that computer. And the last hop that was accessible between me and my website was that data center just north of LA. So if you can look out the window and everything's on fire, you can put 2 and 2 together and figure out what must have happened there. Oddly enough, different ISPs, like my phone, could contact it just fine. So there was
and that's because your phone was probably taking a different route.
Yeah. So once that got that straightened itself out, I guess they probably routed around whatever was causing the issue. But yeah. All right, folks. We'll be back.
Also, the fire closest to your data center, and yes, I did bring up a map yesterday.
Yeah.
Is now 100% contained.
Yeah. All right. We'll be back next Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern. Get tech questions, send those to request at radio.air.com. Until then, for Mike and myself, we'll see you next time. Night, everybody.